This is Brian, ScreenFiles.com in review. What I'm looking at today is 2018's El Chicano, directed by Ben Hernandez-Bray. And this was a movie, when I first heard of it, I was really interested in because I think Hispanic culture is really interesting, and it would be nice to see a superhero movie, well, superhero adjacent movie at any rate. I thought it would be kind of cool for a superhero adjacent movie to treat the Latino community in the same fashion that Black Panther, the Marvel Studios movie, treated the African American community. So that was my expectation going in. And admittedly, that's quite a burden for any movie to carry. The thing is, though, El Chicano doesn't really try, and that's where it was most disappointing to me. Though, let's look at what works. As I said, I like the idea that at least it touches on Latino and Hispanic culture. I wish it went deeper, much deeper than it actually did, but at least it touched upon it in the visual sense at any rate. So that was pretty interesting. And also I thought what was pretty cool was the whole visual aesthetic of this movie. The design of El Chicano's mask, the cast, which was all Latino, was just great to see and something you don't see all that often. But unfortunately, those are the only things that really were worth highlighting for this movie, which means a lot of it isn't that great. Let's go into that as well. Ben Hernandez-Bray, on top of being a director, is also a stunt actor as well as a stunt coordinator. And according to IMDb, he has 128 credits, which is a huge amount of credits for doing stunts. Though more than a few stunts in El Chicano aren't well done. When I say well done, I mean it's very obviously a stunt, and it looks very stagey. And some of them are also not edited very well, which again is weird, coming from the perspective of a person who's made a living off of doing stunts. By way of example, David Leitch, I think it's pronounced that way. In any case, he is the director of those Keanu Reeves movies where he plays this assassin and he loves his dog and stuff like that. The reason I mention it is David Leitch is a stunt person, and that shows in his movies. His movies are, the physical stunts are impeccable. Not the same here. Now, the budget for those movies are more than likely more than El Chicano, but that being said, that doesn't quite explain why the stunts either don't look that great or they're just not edited very well. In any case, it's really odd coming from a person who has such experience in this field. And as I already mentioned, I expected a better representation of Latino culture in this movie. I mean, sure, you get an impression of the lives of people who live in LA, granted, but at the same time, the movie touches on themes and ideas that go beyond that go into Mexico and other areas of the Spanish diaspora. And I wanted to see more of that. I wanted to see, for instance, the design of the El Chicano mask looks vaguely like the Aztec calendar, some of its designs. And I would have liked to have seen more about El Chicano. How did his character come to being? They did some explanation, to be sure, but it wasn't nearly in-depth enough, and the movie clearly didn't dedicate the time to it that it should have. So that was a bit disappointing. As I mentioned earlier, Ben Hernandez-Bray co-wrote this. Joe Carnahan, who directed The Grey, The A-Team, Smoking Aces, I believe. He has quite the resume, and that this movie is so essentially hollow and very much surface is weird and not to be expected when working with Carnahan at any rate. So that was kind of not a great thing and a little disappointing, truth be told. The story of El Chicano begins when these two friends, very close friends, witness this vigilante as children. One becomes a cop, one becomes a criminal. And there's very much a biblical overtone to it, which is interesting. Unfortunately, it's not something the script really spends any time with. I've often criticized Zack Snyder for overtly biblical references in his DC movies. They're irritating and they're not necessary. This would be a movie where such things would better fit. After all, we don't know who El Chicano is prior to this movie, and the references would help establish what's going on. Overtly Christian references, in fact, would play really well into the milieu that this movie is creating. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen. Again, it's not necessary for the movie in and of itself, but it's another layer that's missing that I think would enrich in this whole experience. Another thing is that the actor who plays El Chicano is Raul Castillo. He's not a bad actor by any stretch, but his performance seemed, at least to me, very subdued and understated. But the thing is, they had him opposite Jose Pablo Cantillo, who played another cop. And he was fiery, he was passionate. He stole virtually every scene he appeared in. Now keep in mind something. His character was the friend of the lead character. Yet every time he turns up, he dominated the scenes, which was really strange. And for a large part of this movie, I wanted to see him as El Chicano, because he had this fiery nature about him, and he just dominated. But Jose Pablo Cantillo was just such a better actor in this context. It really, his performance was just dynamic. It reminded me a little bit of Chicano in Scarface. Not quite as theatrical, but very passionate and fiery. So on the whole, El Chicano is worth seeing. It's not a bad movie, just underwhelming. This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com in review. Do you agree, disagree? Let me know down below. And as usual, consider a like or a follow. Peace.